back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
This is The Law Show on CL 650, and this time around we're talking about family law, the breakup of a relationship, a marriage, and we have a family lawyer, David Halkett here. He's a partner at Macquarie Hunter, and Leah Donaldson, an associate in Surrey. And I have to come to your office one day because I hear you have a pretty skookum view of the Lower Mainland.
We do. Leah and I have a great view to the south and west from our office, and our sunsets will get very nice soon.
September and is October. Yeah, is really the best, right?
Exactly, and we have great views November through January. The sun went on our rare sunny days that we have.
Never rains here.
It can be the sky's just orange at our end of the office, so it's really nice.
All right, now sun is setting on a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good segue.
So when you have somebody that comes to you, quickly, because we are in the fall now, is this a time where you see more activity? Summer's past, kids are back at school. When are the busy times for you?
Well, for the most part, it's busy all year, but we get a lot of our newest clients twice a year, usually in September and January. They've had one last summer and a summer holiday together.
I can't take it anymore.
Exactly. And then they have one last Christmas, and then they separate in January.
All right. So how much does family come into play with this stuff? Is it like parents-in-law and stuff like that, meddling in family?
It certainly can be. What I find for me personally is that it seems to be more of an issue between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Mm-hmm. And either mother-in-law tells daughter-in-law she's not treating son, baby boy, well enough, or isn't parenting properly, and the son seems to side more with the mom, and that can cause some lovely hassles.
Right. And then they come to see you.
Exactly.
All right. Now, when someone comes to see you, Leah, what do you suggest that they bring with them? So the first consultation is just giving you an idea of where they're at, right? Is that all that really is?
Yeah, it's to give us a background of the relationship, but also the assets and liabilities of the parties. So as much information that they can gather and bring with them on the initial meeting is beneficial, as well as details about the children, the current parenting arrangements. All of that is the information that we need to give proper advice.
And is there a catalog of things that you maybe don't instantly think about, but you should have access to?
Yeah, well, the person should set out, roughly what their assets are, what debts they have, if they can remember when they were incurred. Also, if they brought anything into the relationship, or if there was ever anything signed between the parties dealing with ownership of the assets.
Or an inheritance, maybe?
Exactly. And anything they have that can be beneficial, because the initial consult's usually about an hour. There's only so much that can be covered in the first hour. Lee and I have the experience we know what the issues are probably within 5 minutes of the person talking to us.
Because there are some similarities from...
Yeah, the law is pretty standard in a lot of these areas. But the more information they bring to us, the better advice they can get in the initial consult, and we can give a better idea as to where we see the file going, assuming it proceeds to litigation.
Now, for example... maybe the wife inherits $100,000 from a parent or a grandparent or something like that, and then they take that money and use it as a down payment on a house. Now, is that common property, or is that theirs when they went that's where it gets murky, right?
Lee and I are smiling at each other because our statute says that would remain the person's property, the inheritance. They'd keep that first $100,000. Any growth would be divided. But a case came down that says that if it's put into the other spouse's name or joint names, it may very well lose the exclusion. So I don't think our government was expecting that. So now they're making some preliminary discussions as to how they're going to deal with this case that came down. But the key is, if you get an inheritance and put into property, try to make sure that you have something in writing that says that if we separate, this will remain mine, regardless of whether or not it's pointed in joint names or into this other spouse.
Because the opposite could be that was gifted,
exactly,
to me.
Exactly.
And
there still is Leah knows this far more than I do from her estate side, but there's still a presumption of gift between spouses. And if it goes back to, I think, the old times of the husband was supposed to have the predominance economically. So if you put something in the wife's name, it was presumed to be a gift in the absence of evidence to the contrary. So if Lee and I were married and I put something into her name under the old law and the presumption of advancement, it's deemed that it's hers. It's a gift, unless I have something to say it isn't. So if you put an asset into your spouse's name or even joint names, if it's not something in writing, it might be presumed to be a gift.
So where are we on that with the courts or the government?
It's still a gray area. And so that's what I was going to say, is that it's actually also important, even if you're not separating, to come in and speak with a family lawyer or an estate planning lawyer about things like gifts and inheritances.
That's what you do.
Right.
Both. Yeah.
Because you can get some advice about how you can treat it or what you should or shouldn't do with that money that can, pay dividends way down the road if you separate, if you don't.
Because we are in now, until the new transfer tax came in, a very heated real estate market. So people are much more interested in these things, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's, sometimes for an inheritance can make the difference. If you got inheritance of a couple $100,000 that would come to you instead of be divided, it's still a big chunk to go to.
A lot of money.
Exactly.
Now, does that, in Surrey, you have a lot of South Asian clients, Indo-Canadian families that live in common homes, right?
Yeah.
So multi-generational. Is that another layer
it is.
That you have to go through? Because that's quite complicated, because it's almost like a common property. Everybody shares it, right?
We often see property registered in two generations' names, so parents-in-law, basically. And so that's another layer that we have to go through and determine who put what into the property. Was it registered in the right people's names, often for mortgage financing reasons. So there's a whole lot of factors that go into it that need to be sort of peeled back.
Yeah, there's two aspects to that, because the asset that's in either of the spouse's name is the family property asset. But then the other spouse often says, well, I also contributed and we were paying for the entire house. And so they may claim against the parents for a portion of that house under another aspect of law that's more of an estate matter, but constructive trust, and say that I contributed to this and you didn't and such. So it can get quite ugly at times.
And so what is the average time between when you start the proceedings to getting a divorce? I mean, you must get that all the time, because, like, as you said, somebody comes in on Monday, they want to settle by Friday. Yeah. Well, that's not happening. But what is a realistic time frame?
Well, for the divorce,
you must get asked that probably first.
Oh, yeah.
It's always going to be wrapped up.
Exactly. For the divorce, you have to be separated a year anyway.
Okay.
So that's just to end the legal marriage. The others, depending on how amicable, and sometimes people have talked before, you can resolve the property stuff within a couple of months. But usually we get trials within 12 to 18 months from the time we start to when we're supposed to have our trial. And we assume that it gets dealt with in the first trial. Sometimes it's adjourned over, but usually within 2 years, probably everything should be wrapped up.
Does every divorce have to go to court?
No.
You don't have to see a judge in order to have the...
No. Only a judge can grant the divorce,
right.
But often we do it more just through paper that we file through the registry, and it's reviewed and stamped by the court.
So it's not an appearance?
No.
Okay. So, but you're saying that, to set a court date is 12 plus months?
For a trial, yeah.
For a trial. Okay. Now, so you have that list that you want to have of different assets and what have you, the state of the children are in now, who they're living with, all those sorts of things. But it all gets muddied when you have other factors. Like you have one spouse that's controlling the money. Like you might have somebody come in and say, hey, I want to get a divorce. And you say, well, how much do you have in your RSPs? How much do you have in your bank account? How much do you owe on your credit cards? And they have no idea.
Yep.
So how do you find that out?
Well, it's shocking how many, in 2016, how many spouses, and it goes both ways, don't know what the other one has. So what Lee and I will tell all our clients is don't resolve anything until you've had disclosure of what the assets are. Force the person to at least swear at the minimum a financial statement where they take an oath that says this is all I have. Sometimes people have ideas that the other spouse has assets that are hidden somewhere else, and usually they're not. But, depending on how much may be hidden, there can be quite a bit of cost to try and find it. But don't settle anything unless you know what the other side has.
And we can often do that by agreement. So if the other party is represented by a lawyer as well, we don't necessarily have to start the claim in court. We can say, if I did, you would be required to give me this information. So let's both file or swear financial statements, exchange them, look at the information, and then see if we can resolve it before we go to court.
Yeah.
So how do you ever find out if somebody has been taking money out and putting it somewhere else, buying gold bars or whatever?
Well, what you can do, you can review the bank statements for the last 2 or 3 years. And, you know, some people have, or like me, or have like 1 or 2 bank accounts. It's straightforward, but some have a ton of them, and the money goes all over, and you can, in effect, form a trail that says, here's where all the money is.
But what about a guy who's a drywaller, and he gets paid in cash, and he's not putting the money in the bank?
That's the hard one, and sometimes what you have to do there is you have to, in effect, do a notional standard of living test. So you say, look, you say you make 20 grand a year, but you drove in with a 2000, number of years ago, 2005 Hummer. That was, 110 grand. There's no way you were getting it. Or you find out if they have a loan on something, how much they put down as their income on the loan.
Right.
There are other documents that you can obtain to
try and, in effect, offset the fact that he's paid in cash only.
And then, so that's quite complicated, because I'm sure people who work in a business where they get paid a lot of cash have the ability to squirrel it away somewhere where the other person wouldn't know. Because if it never goes into a bank, how would you know? Well, some people are maybe sell drugs or something, right? You wouldn't know where they get their money. They're certainly not disclosing it.
No. And that's the thing that it comes down to. How much are we talking about a potential extra income versus the cost of obtaining the disclosure for it? And a lot of people just say it's not worth it for them in the end.
But I guess the other part of it would be that they maybe want to come to some kind of settlement so that the other party doesn't tell the government how they really make their money.
Well, that happened in one case I remember from a number of years ago. The person was involved with a nice little motorcycle gang, and she said, look, I know I know how much money you bring in and where you get it from, and I'll go to court and I'll mention it. And before you knew it, she got a call from the guy's dad saying, how much do you want? And we'll settle it up. And because they don't want that to be getting into court.
I can imagine. So quite an onion we're peeling back here today. We're speaking with Leah Donaldson, associate at Macquarie Hunter, and partner David Halkett. We're talking about family law and kind of the steps you should go through when you're going through the process, separating and maybe eventually ending in divorce. We'll find out more when we come back next on The Law Show on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.